So I think this next video is going to be really quite fascinating. Let me first start off with a reminder about the three motivational systems: fight or flight, the dopaminergic system, tend, and befriend. Now, when you look at those at face value, you can see from like a Maslow's hierarchy perspective that they start and they become more complex. So fear, anger, cortisol, adrenaline, fight or flight. The dopaminergic system, so dopamine and reward seeking behaviors and the sense of excitement. Tend and befriend, oxytocin level, much more relational. Okay, so you have these. Now, we see that there's a bit of a pecking order, but we also know that, so for instance, a person who is completely addicted to, say, opioids, will they at that point abandon the children? Quite probably. This could very likely outcome. So what you see is that it makes them ignore a different level or miss the level. That same person will also put themselves in dangerous situations. Now, we can look at the underlying neurological correlates to say, does the substance actually affect how they perceive fear and anger? Sure. Now, one of the things we also know is that in the world of addiction, we remember the McLean model of the brain, the prefrontal cortex and the middle brain don't work very well. So most decisions come from an emotional decision-making perspective. Okay, so that's all well and good. But when you look at that, what you suddenly see is a conflict. At times I'll talk about it being a serotonin brain versus a dopamine brain. We know that as people age, they tend to be more serotonin driven in the sense that they tend to prefer calm, peaceful vacations over the exciting ones where they're jumping out of airplanes and parachuting and taking high mountain adventures. Now, clearly that's a gross generalization, but it is generally true. So what happens is we put ourselves in environments that feel comfortable and safe to us. I just read an article where it talked about parachutists in Norway. So it's an advanced military group. Young men are jumping out of airplanes. The first time they do it, they're terrified and they're having all of this anxiety and fear hours and hours and hours ahead of time. They jump out of the plane, they land, they're safe, right? They're still fearful for hours afterwards. Now, you fast forward a few months, they've jumped out many times. You can look at them just up to a few minutes before they jump. Their heart rate's the same, their cortisol levels are the same, no problem. But then they get up to that very last moment and they hop out. In the moment of hopping out, it's as if they've been just as afraid as ever before. But as soon as they land, they're like, okay, what's for lunch? And they move on. So there's a part of habituation. You get familiar and comfortable to different situations. Now, obviously, there's a lot of temperament and genetic variability to all this. But on the whole, it's true just to within your own relative perspective of yourself. So all that being said, when you're looking at how you formulate your life, at face value, you're trying to balance, is this the right amount of safety and security? Is this the right amount of excitement? Now, what you'll see is some people will live in one place and do the same job and spend time with the same people all the days of their lives. Because yes, it is safe and more secure, and there's virtue in that. And then on the other hand, you'll see people quitting jobs, moving around the planet, being in and out of relationships, and living a life that appears to be much more exciting. And again, indeed, there are virtues there. And indeed, we do need both of these things in measure to whatever is appropriate for you. You've heard me use the metaphor of the oak tree, right? Understanding who you are and what's right for you and that type of balance. Now, if you notice, I didn't speak about the third motivational system, the tend and befriend. The idea here is no matter what you end up deciding to do, as far as safety, security, and excitement, we still kind of need other people with us. And you can choose to orient yourself in such a way that you do have those people. And you also have to remember that indeed relationships do grow with time, but they do not necessarily have to continue. Because truly, when you meet a person, you don't know if they'll ever be there again. This comes out of the work of Martin Buber, and he had a book called I, Thou. And it's a conversation about how it is that we create meaning in our lives through our interactions with the people around us. And he started his story by talking about, this is before World War I or II, I want to say one. A young man comes to his office. Now at the time, Martin Buber was a rabbi, and he was busy trying to get ready for the following Saturday. And the young man says, Father, I need to speak. And so he invites him in. They talk for a couple minutes, but quickly Martin Buber realizes he's rushed, he has stuff to do. And he kind of pushes the young man off and says they'll talk another day. As it ends up happening, the young man goes off to war and dies, and Martin Buber never talks to him again. Because in that first moment, he saw the young man as an inconvenience, a burden. He didn't see the young man for who he was. And so Martin Buber comes up with this concept of an I-thou relationship, as opposed to an I-it relationship. An it is an object to be used. An I-it is like a car. It either functions or it doesn't. It makes my life better or it doesn't. And this is a place where really judgment is pretty predominant in our lives. Now, this pencil, if it didn't write, I would throw it away, and I would not have an emotional response to it. It is an it, and I have an I-it relationship. Now, on the other hand, if people that I care about were to die, I have an I-thou relationship. I look at them as another sovereign being, a person of equal value to myself. And when I relate to them in that way, I am creating meaning in their life, and they are creating meaning in my life. Now, if we take this one step deeper, from an existential perspective, we recognize that the people we interact with and live with, we may not actually ever see them again. The problem with that is it actually always kind of keeps us on our toes. It is a little bit more stressful, right? It kind of evokes that fight or flight, right? But what it also does is it keeps us from taking relationships for granted. And it keeps us from taking life for granted. And in that way, it opens us to seeing people for who they are. And if we're genuinely interested, they will be someone new. Because we always change. And that actually, in its own small way, allows the dopaminergic system to become activated, and for the tend and befriend system to be activated. Now, one of the problems of being human is we do not have space to remember and deeply relate to all the people that we will ever know. Truly, I remember reading this somewhere, that we can only know 500 people. And I think for some it's less, and for some it's probably more, but that's really not that many if you think about it in the scheme of our lives. So we need to weigh, who do we want to give time and space to? And who, unfortunately, will just have to be an it in our world. That being said, presently sitting in a hotel room, there is a lady who sits at the desk every day. I remember her name. I say good morning. I ask her how she's doing. I look her in the eyes, and I genuinely mean it. I will give her time if she needs it. And in that moment, while probably in a year from now I won't remember her, right, we have a genuine connection, a genuine engagement. This allows there to be meaning in both of our lives. Because truthfully, while it is that we may not know each other in a year, we can truly affect each other. And that'll be another conversation for another day.